Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel and the week 3 of my Letterboxd diary. If you watched it last week, in my previous video I talked about doing themes for this series for time to time. And this week it is one of those times. That's right baby, this week we are talking about The Omen. And without further ado, let's start the video. 70s is a good decade for horror movies. We had classics like Halloween, Alien, The Exorcist, Jaws, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We also had Carrie and Suspiria, which were ass. But we also had The Omen, a film I will definitely place in the good side of 70s horror movies. It isn't particularly scary or nerving, no. Instead, it excels in its subject matter and execution, especially considering the time it was released. Briefly, the story is about a weird-ass kid named Damien who turns out to be the Antichrist, the main ops of Jesus, the Green Goblin of his Spider-Man, if you will.
Right.
It is an intriguing twist on the classic portrayal of children as innocent, angelic figures. Usually, I don't like comparing the original films to the newer prequels or the remakes, but it's somehow impossible to do that. As you may know, in my last video I said I watched the first Omen without realizing it's a prequel to this film. Now with watching the original movie, I can see the homages and changes in the narrative more clearly. There are definitely parts that the prequel does better, and I would like to see one more remake of the original movie continued from the prequel. But that doesn't mean the original is bad or whatsoever. I would say the Father Brendan character in the prequel is more watchable than this iteration. He is more stoic and trustworthy. Aside from the fact that he sounds like the Cookie Monster and is nearly incomprehensible without subtitles.
I'm so sorry, Margaret. I tried just to leave you be.
But in the original, we are seeing a more unhinged version of the character. I mean, I kinda give him a pass because he has a terminal illness and carries the mark of the devil, so that might turn a guy a bit nuts, I guess. Overall, the story is well balanced and keeps your focus alive throughout. The score is fantastic and actually puts you in the mood with its aggressive religious choir. But what I said about the Rosemary's Baby is standing out here as well. When you watch this movie today and have some sort of an idea about it, the movie loses its magic a little bit. Because throughout the movie, we as the audience know the truth about Damien, but it isn't shown or told. So when we learn it clearly in the movie, it doesn't spark anything. However, my experience with the first Omen was completely different. Going in blind, I found myself more engaged and affected by its unfolding narrative. Anyway, it was a well-balanced course for the most of the watch. There were some aspects of it that I found weird, like who does leave their deeply injured wife alone to find out the truth about if his adopted child is really the Antichrist or not. When you say it out loud, it sounds like the craziest shit ever. But it was a fun watch and we can end this series at that. No need of a further project. Huh, they made a sequel? Okay, I guess. That question kept roaming around in my head all throughout the movie. First of all, this is a very cash-grabby, unnecessary sequel. The original film stood perfectly on its own. We didn't need to know more about Damien's story. It was already wrapped up in a way that left room for interpretation, and honestly, that was enough. But here we are, watching the adolescent adventures of the Antichrist. And it is indeed boring. Sure, things happen, but they are either nonsensical or just plain uninteresting. There are a lot of deaths this time, much more than the original film, but the sheer absurdity of some of these scenes make it hard to take them seriously. Take the reporter lady that got hit by a semi-truck, for example. She just jumps out of nowhere and nearly clears the truck. It looks like she just hits the upper side of it because she can't clear it, and that kills her. I don't think getting hit by a semi does that to a person. Then there's the guy who gets trapped under the ice. That scene starts off believable. A person accidentally falling into icy water? Sure, that's plausible. But the silly part in here is nobody actually tries to help the guy. I mean, they do, but not really. You can make more of an effort if you see someone in that situation. This movie is indeed flawed in a lot of aspects. The acting is a downgrade than the first one for sure, but it is tolerable. What makes you suffer in the movie is the writing. Anytime someone learns Damien is the Antichrist, they lose their minds instantly. No processing, no disbelief, just straight up panic mode. There were some characters that were holding their composure and actually thinking that is a crazy talk for a moment. Because it is. If I were told you Ricky here is the spawn of the devil, would you believe me? Ricky! Of course you wouldn't. And the way Damien acknowledges that he's the Antichrist was bizarre. He doesn't know much about himself and nobody really explains him a lot, but all of a sudden he starts to say his mother was a jackal and he got that dog in him. In the end, this movie feels like a sequel nobody asked for. We didn't need it to exist and definitely don't need any more after this. God, are you kidding me right now? Another one? Why? Oh hey, I know that guy. Man, this movie was even more boring than the previous one. And honestly, it feels even more unnecessary. For the majority of the runtime, Damien doesn't even come across as the Antichrist. He just seems like a satanic political figure climbing the ranks. There's one scene where he praises Satan, dramatically vowing something like, "I'll avenge you, daddy!" And it's like, okay, there he is, but that's it. I get that in the last movie Damien spent most of his time unaware of who he really was. But here, at least you could have shown him like a more of a cult leader, or someone actively embracing his Antichrist persona. There's one moment near the end where he kind of has that vibe, but why just there? You could have utilized that aspect of his character for the majority of the movie. The pacing was brutal with this one. For the first time ever, I even thought about watching a movie in double speed. The acting isn't particularly great either. Sam Neill does an okay job with the portrayal of Damien, and the rest of the cast does it with a passable grade as well. I will say the acting was better than the last one. But again, this movie has a lot of stupidity like the last one. Damien barely uses his superpowers. I believe I only saw him use it in 1 or 2 scenes. In the last film, he at least used them for a couple of times. And one of the only times when he uses his superpowers in this movie might be the dumbest scene in the whole film. These two monks try to corner Damien on a bridge with their magic knives. They try to act all intimidating and shit. But guys, do you seriously think the bastard spawn of the Satan can be that stupid? They didn't teach you anything in the school of fighting evil forces? The movie's central conflict is supposed to be Damien versus the new baby Jesus. Rocky Balboa versus Ivan Drago, if you will.
If he dies, he dies.
And Damien gets killed by the TV interviewer lady all of a sudden. This movie isn't worth talking much, but unfortunately you still hear me talking about it. At least this scene was very funny for no reason.
There's only one boy left, and that's your son. Destroy him or be destroyed. Damien, for the love of God!
Anyway, I'm glad we are done with these. At least they figured out to end the series once and for all with killing off Damien, because I don't think I could have tolerated more sequels. I beg for the love of God, I can't take this anymore. Seriously, another one? Even after Damien's death, someone thought it was a good idea to drag the series even further. There isn't any reason for it. There hasn't been any reason since the first sequel, and that was a piece of shit too. Okay, I'm holding my composure. I'm good. Let's talk about this movie. To put it bluntly, it was very boring, just like the rest of the sequels. For the majority of the movie, I was convinced that this was by far the worst one. Choppy editing, awful acting, except for 1 or 2 people, and awful sound design. I mean, at some scenes, they pump up the music so bad it gets very hard to hear the dialogue. But don't worry, because dialogue isn't shit anyways. Quickly, I want to give some flowers to Asia Vera, the young actress who portrays Dahlia. She is the sole highlight of this movie. She is super weird, super creepy, but also can portray an adorable version of herself time to time if needed. Everyone else either done a piss poor job or were just borderline passable. The story though is a bit weird. For the first 90% of the movie, it feels like a generic Omen-inspired project rather than an actual continuation of the franchise. You can easily convince someone that this is a standalone film and got nothing to do with the Omen series. But all of a sudden, Damien Thorne is mentioned and Delia is his daughter. Surprise, surprise. I gotta admit, the ending and the twist was decent and the last shot was pretty cool, but that's it. Delia for the major part is just a weird girl, and all of a sudden her mother decides to hate her for it. Why, you might ask? Because her nanny, which is an even weirder person than Delia, says some bullshit about aura and energy, and how Dahlia's energy turned her spirit crystals black, and so on.
Now, they're minerals! Jesus, Maria!
And yeah, for this time we are mixing the Bible lore with psychic energy talk.
Energy's real low. Look at my palm.
His palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy.
And honestly, if I was Delia and my nanny was that annoying, I will crash out too. There is really not much else to say about this film, not because I don't want to talk about it anymore. Well, that might be the reason actually. These sequels, and I'm talking about every single one of them, were some of the most pointless pieces of media I ever consumed in my life. I'm glad I'm finally done with this series, and you know what? I don't even want a new remake following the prequel anymore. I'm literally done. Okay, this one was decent. Besides the first Omen, I will say this remake is the most gripping movie in the entire series. But I'm afraid I probably won't talk about it as much as the others, and that's because it's nearly identical with the original movie. I will say it is a very good modern adaptation of The Omen, but there's nothing much to dissect here. The cast is the best one out of all movies and their acting is carrying this film throughout. With the likes of Liv Schreiber, Julia Stiles and David Thewlis leading the bunch, we also have Maya Farrow and Michael Gambon for the supporting roles. Now why didn't I give this movie the same score as the original? Well, it is not because it's a near carbon copy. That's not the issue. My problem was around some parts movie tries to focus on the jump scare trope a lot, especially in the dream sequences, and it's okay, around that time it was really popular, but I believe we moved past that trope behind. It is safe to say that's the cheesiest trope in the entire horror genre. And around some parts, there's also this sense that the movie assumes you've seen the original, especially in the scene where Robert and Keith went to find the burnt priest. There were little to none explanation of the events that occurred, and if there was one, it was a very sloppy way of doing it. Still, it was a fun and easy watch. Definitely much better than the sequels. And we are finally done. This week was brutal. I had to force myself to sit through some truly awful movies. But when I do another themed episode, I will definitely spend more time picking and preparing my movie list so I don't suffer this much again. But I hope you liked this episode. If you did, please press the like button and subscribing to the channel is always much appreciated. Thank you for watching and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.